The air smells of gunpowder and smoke. Faces show fatigue and cold. On the streets and in basements rise those who still hold the defense, and those who go on the attack. When close combat comes, everything is decided in an instant. A second to aim, a second to press the trigger. Legends are born in those seconds. In 1941, on the fronts of Eastern Europe, a weapon appeared that instantly changed the idea of close combat. Compact, simple, capable of unleashing a barrage of bullets on the enemy with such intensity that even battle-hardened foes felt panic. Soviet soldiers called it simply the PPSh. The Germans had another, more fearsome nickname, and it quickly spread among the units that met it in city streets and forest ambushes. This submachine gun was born in response to a simple question: how to give a shooter on the battlefield maximum fire and minimum fuss. The design was meant to be a tool, not art, cheap to produce, simple to manufacture, and reliable in the hands of those who had no time for fine-tuning. It was a weapon for people of war, not for parades but for blood and smoke. It fired fast. Very fast. Short bursts that turned into a continuous stream of bullets broke resistance in confined spaces, raised the attacker's morale, and sowed panic among defenders. The drama of the scene: a soldier standing in a narrow corridor at night, sliced by flashes of fire, is familiar from frontline diaries. Wherever that sound appeared, the enemy seemed to shrink and become vulnerable. And another important feature: this weapon did not require complicated maintenance. It could be cleaned in the field, repaired with the simplest tools, and a soldier with little experience could be taught to use it in a few hours. That very simplicity enabled mass production. It could be manufactured quickly and in enormous quantities, and huge numbers are sometimes a greater advantage in war than technical perfection. Voiceover, quiet, tensely. In the hands of an experienced fighter, this submachine gun became a machine of moral advantage, not just a tool of fire, but a factor that broke the enemy's will. Archival footage, crowds of soldiers, brief flashes of muzzles in the dusk, dirty hands grabbing the weapon, and the rifle moving on to the next position. In 1941, German troops struck at the heart of the country. On the front, chaos, losses, a demand for weapons that could be produced quickly, in large numbers and cheaply. It was in such conditions that the simplest, yet most effective, solutions emerged. The backstory begins in the 1930s. Soviet designers had already been working on the problem of automatic fire for infantry. One of the first results was the PPD, Degtyaryov's submachine gun, Vasily Degtyaryov's design, which appeared at the end of the 1930s. The PPD was a good example for its time: reliable but complex to manufacture, too many threaded parts and turned components, which made it expensive and slow for mass production. When in June 1941 the enemy broke deep into the country, the need for thousands of simple automatics became urgent. Based on the PPD experience and the understanding that industry had to work for speed, another approach emerged: a design that could be made by stamping from sheet metal. The author of this idea was Georgy Shpagin. An engineer who skillfully combined theory with the pragmatism of war, he proposed a maximally simplified design: less machining, fewer turning operations, more stamped assemblies. The solution was radical: abandon expensive milled receivers in favor of a tubular receiver and panels of stamped steel. Another key component was the 7.62 by 25 mm Tokarev cartridge. It was a fast, flat round with a high muzzle velocity that gave good penetration for a pistol caliber and allowed effective automatic fire at close ranges. Combined with a 71-round drum, this pairing became a deadly barrage instrument. Officially, Shpagin's design was adopted in 1941 under the designation PPSh-41, Pistolet Pulmet Shpagina, 1941. But the most interesting part was not the adoption date, but the way it was made mass-producible: use of stamped parts, simple joints, and minimal fine finishing, all of which significantly reduced manufacturing time and cost. One of the most recognizable features of the PPSh was the 71-round drum magazine. It was a huge drum that allowed long waves of fire without frequent reloading. For close combat, a street, a room, a defensive burrow, it meant one thing: You could pour hundreds of rounds into the enemy in a minute and close the distance without wasting time on complex manipulations. But there were trade-offs. The drum was heavy and sometimes prone to jamming, especially if the magazine was poorly assembled or became dirty. In the field, simpler box magazines of 35 rounds began to replace it. They became popular in combat use for their reliability and ease of manufacture. Most importantly, it was mass production that made the PPSh what the Germans feared. Simple manufacturing techniques allowed factories to run 2, 3, or more shifts. Thousands of units rolled off lines every month. Plants in Kovrov, Tula, and other cities adapted. Stamping, welding, minimal finishing operations, and a reliable submachine gun appeared in the hands of a Red Army soldier. The numbers were impressive, millions produced during the war years. For the enemy, it mattered less how perfect each unit was than that there were many of them and enough to equip entire assault detachments. That is why the PPSh was often described as a torrent of fire, an avalanche of bullets that was difficult to stop. The darkness of the city turns into a continuous roar. Footsteps, gunshots, screams, and in this mixture one sound stands out above the rest. Short, almost continuous downpours of bullets that cut the night like a power saw. It's not a machine gun, it's a submachine gun in the hands of a Red Army soldier going on the assault. The first large-scale battles involving the PPSh began already in the second half of 1941, but the true test for this weapon came in urban fighting, above all Stalingrad, where narrow streets, buildings, and basements created ideal conditions for close combat weapons. It was here that the PPSh demonstrated what it was designed for, a dense, controllable barrage of bullets pouring from a 71-round drum or a 35-round magazine, allowing assault groups to neutralize whole enemy firing points in a matter of seconds. The technical characteristics explain the effect. A rate of fire of about 900 rounds per minute, the high-velocity 7.62 by 25 mm Tokarev cartridge, and the large drum provided a continuous cloud of bullets that was hard to penetrate. But equally important was the ease of use. A recruit could be taught to handle the PPSh very quickly, load it, aim, fire. In close combat, that simplicity translated into survival. German soldiers who encountered the PPSh in defensive and offensive operations in the East noted another psychological effect. The intensity and character of the salvo demoralized defenders. Dozens of rounds poured into a room forced defenders to abandon positions or hide in deeper cover, exactly what helped Soviet assault teams seize floors and courtyards. German after-action notes and frontline reports recorded that in close fighting the enemy behaved differently when a torrent from the drum was coming at him. The space for maneuver narrowed and the tempo of battle accelerated. The PPSh proved itself not only in cities. In forests and during night ambushes, its ease of handling and stopping power made it indispensable for reconnaissance groups and partisans. Frequent cases in which small Soviet assault detachments operated behind enemy lines and literally rolled up flanks thanks to powerful close-range fire support became regular. They were not always described in grand reports, but their results, lost positions, disrupted communications, were tangible. However, combat baptism also revealed weak points. The drum magazine, while providing impressive capacity, sometimes jammed in dust or when handled carelessly. Therefore, in the field, soldiers more often preferred the 35-round box magazines. The high rate of fire quickly exhausted ammunition, and hauling the heavy drum could complicate long marches. Despite this, the policy of mass equipping meant that if a unit had several PPShs, its offensive capability noticeably increased. Another important aspect was training and tactics. Commanders of assault companies and squads learned to combine the PPSh with grenade throws and suppressive fire from machine guns. 1 or 2 PPShs in a squad could act as a propeller. They would punch through the line, and others would follow and consolidate the gain. It was precisely through such integration into close combat tactics that Shpagin's submachine gun became not merely an instrument of individual lethality but an element of collective striking power.